So here's the it's not the one that Jeff told me not to get to, but some of you guys know me well. Today I am going to share a little bit about more of a personal, I guess, family testimony, if you will, about our family. And let's just have one more word of prayer real quick. Heavenly Father, again, we come to you and again to ask you to fill this place with your Holy Spirit, and hopefully we will be able to take some out of something good and positive, and perhaps even share it with our friends and family later on this week. Just name, amen. So as many of you guys know, or some of you guys know that, if you know me well or not, but I don't follow sports. I don't follow the typical traditional sports, if you will. Football or basketball. There was a time that I did follow them a little bit, but I follow sports that are a little more less popular, if you will. I guess if anything, being Mexican, I do kind of have to, it's more or less in my blood, follow soccer. And so I guess that's the most traditional sport that I do follow. But some of you guys know me, that you know that I don't really follow traditional sports. I tend to follow, and obviously one of my favorite sports is cycling.
Cycling very, very close. I follow triathlons and running, and I'm one also to be able to sit down and, for example, watch a marathon, which is
6.2 miles. Watch it from mile zero, from when they haven't started yet until the very end. And now you're probably thinking, perhaps maybe like golf. Well, that seems a rather boring pastime. And I can see why people can think that, or will think that. I do remember watching the 2011 Boston Marathon, and I guess it's somewhat interesting to me just because I have ran a few marathons, and I know more or less, and again, because I do follow some of the sports closely and the athletes and whatnot, it becomes a little more interesting. But I do remember watching the 2011 Boston Marathon, and it started out just like any other marathon that I had watched. And usually at the beginning of a marathon, everybody's fresh, everybody thinks they're going to win, and there's a lot of excitement, of course, and adrenaline, obviously. And sure enough, they start the race. And this particular Boston Marathon, it's actually a point-to-point race. So they start in a place, and it's not a loop. They end up at a completely different place. And just like any other marathon, and it's kind of interesting that at the beginning, you always get those athletes that are pretty good athletes, but they just kind of want the time, if you will, for sponsors or whatnot.
And this particular race was interesting because you can see the woman, there's the African woman, and then behind her there's another runner who I've been kind of following. She was out of Michigan. This was her debut marathon. What an amazing stage, of course, to do your first marathon, the Boston Marathon. I remember watching that race, and again, we're all kind of rooting for her, Desiree. And we come to halfway through the race, and she's still in the lead pack, which is great. I guess it could be worse, but and then once you get towards the I guess the end of that particular course, I believe around mile 20-21, they have this hill they call Parkway Hill, and some of you guys might have heard of them or not. And I've never done that Boston Marathon, not that good, but I can tell you that once you get to a marathon, you get to mile 20-21. other than the fact that for some of those professional runners, that's when they say, it's really when the race starts for them. For us mortals, that's when it becomes real challenging. And as they got up to the top of Heartbreak Hill, like I said, I believe about mile 21, Desiree is still up there. And, we're all getting super excited. And, the next couple of miles came through, and again, Desiree's still there. And they finally got to mile, I believe it's about mile 20, end of mile 25, 26. And they make the runners make a hard left into Boyson Street, and that's actually what it looks like. And when they come around the corner, Desiree is actually took over the lead, and we're thinking like this is great. I mean, she's going to be the first American to win in over 30 years. This is amazing. And again, watching it live, it's even more exciting. At least it was for me. And so the straightaway into the finish line, again, I've never been there, but it looks like it might as well be 5 miles because it looks very, very long. And of course, there's people along the road. And, Desiree took off and she's running, and then there's two runners behind her. And then pretty soon, one of the runners actually catches up to Desiree and passes. Oh man, that's terrible. And then, we just kept watching, everybody's cheering. And then Desiree actually catches up to the lady again and passes her. And this is very, very unique because at this point in the race, stuff like this doesn't really happen a whole lot. And we said, that's it. Desiree is going to win. She's going to end the American drought for the Boston Marathon. And then one of the runners, and that's actually the picture. If you see the top, there's this 2011 Boston Marathon. The lady actually passes Desiree at the very end, and that is a shot taken from below the tape that they break when they win the marathon. And Desiree actually came in second place. And I looked it up the other day, and she literally came 3 seconds behind the winner. And it was obviously disappointing from a sports stand, but that also kind of got me thinking that there's a lot of things that I think you guys also share. You guys probably do share the same thoughts or feelings. That there's a lot of things that do happen in our lives that have happened in the past. That and for me, I can tell you that there are some things for sure that I've been able to look back and say, oh, I know exactly why that happened, why God let that happen. And there's some things that I still kind of scratch my head that I really don't know why something happened or God let something happen. Back in 1980, like I said earlier, I was adopted, and my parents at the time lived in Mexico City. And that particular year, they decided they were going to go out to Montemorelos. There's an Adventist university there to go spend time with family. Of course, my dad had kind of grown up there in Montemorelos, so it was kind of a homecoming, if you will. So they went up north, and obviously my sisters, I want to say. They were probably between 4, 5, perhaps maybe 7, or almost 7. And so they ended up in Montemorelos, and I do believe that particular year, Christmas Day was on a Thursday. And they had Christmas with family. And that Sabbath, they all went to church again. It was one of those scenarios that my parents hadn't been there in a while, and it was very, very nice for them to visit with people. And after Sabbath school, word has it that my dad was out, just kind of between the 2 services, was saying hi to people, and there was a friend of his that came to him to say hi, of course. But at the same time, he also told him, and he said, hey, this is kind of random, but
So a couple of days ago, there was a woman that came into the hospital. The university has a hospital there, and and actually, gave birth to a baby. She's given this baby up for adoption. And back then, I guess the best way to go about this was they had a list, apparently, of a lot of families that were looking to adopt. And he was telling my dad, that they apparently have gone through the list, and because it's Christmas, because they're not answering their phones, who knows? They're still looking, 2, 3 days later, they're still looking for a family to take this little boy. And so my dad said, I mean, yeah, I mean, that would be amazing. Obviously, I have to, kind of talk it over with my wife. And so sure enough, he got to go to my mom and talked about it. Of course, they agreed to it. And they did decide to keep the news of them adopting me from my sisters. Again, they were fairly young, and and the family too, extended family, with the fear that it could spoil perhaps the the service. But after the service, they all got together at my grandparents' house, and that's when they broke the news that they were adopting me. And of course, I guess they were very excited. Also, at the same time, they they weren't planning on it, so they kind of scrambled, from what I understand, to find diapers and whatnot, for to be able to take care of me. And that afternoon, they eventually they all went to the hospital and met me and whatnot. Of course, they lived in Mexico City, so we they took me back. And if I remember correctly, I lived in Mexico City for, I don't know, couple, 3, maybe 4 years. And then we ended up moving back to Montemorelos. And eventually, and again, I don't have the time to go into a whole lot of details. Eventually, we actually became missionaries, and we went down to to South America as missionaries. We moved. At first, we actually lived in Uruguay. If you're not too familiar with the country of Uruguay, it's a super tiny, very, very small country between Brazil and Argentina. But as we moved down there, I was about the age of 6 when I was obviously going to start school. And so our move down there also signaled, if you will, my love-hate relationship with school. And in school, it's going to kind of keep showing up throughout today. But I have memories and of school, just from when I started school, that it was super hard and just complicated, I guess, trying to figure things out. I do remember, plenty of tutors in my past academic life. And after that, we ended up moving to Brazil, and we lived in Uruguay for about 5 years, and then we moved eventually to Brazil. We lived there about 2 years. Here we go again, school. I actually, by the time we were in Brazil, I was in 5th grade or around there, 4th, 5th grade. I actually got held back in 5th grade, just again for not being able to really be where I should be academically. Eventually, we ended up moving to the U.S., the United States here, and the first place where we moved to and we lived was in Washington State, more specifically in Wenatchee, Washington. And if you're not too sure where it is, it's actually, if you look up at a map, it's pretty much smack in the middle of the state of Washington. It's about 2.5 hours east of Seattle, with pretty much the Cascade Mountains running in between, the two parts of the state there. And so again, school, luckily, and obviously, I'm sure my parents planned it all out, but there was an Adventist Day Academy there, which I don't think if I remember correctly, I don't think my oldest sister actually ever did attend the academy, but my other sister, I think she was there for like about a year and a half. She graduated and moved on to Walla Walla that's where my other sister was. And so I was blessed enough to actually, I ended up doing 7 through 12 there at that particular academy. And it was a great place to be for a teenage boy, I guess. Of course, made a lot of friends, and teachers were also amazing. But as we know, you get closer to the end of your senior or your high school years, more specifically your senior year, and you have to start making some plans. and and as you can imagine, I did end up obviously graduating from high school, and again, it wasn't easy. It was hard, and there was a lot of help from teachers that particular school. But the thought of me continuing on to college, and college was, at least in my family, like that's what you're gonna do. Like there's no other option. Um, and so the thought of that, it was just one of those like, oh man, here we go. So of course, I looked around. I ended up, I do believe, going to Southern for a weekend, kind of a long weekend, and it just didn't really, fit what I was looking for. Not that I really knew what I was looking for, but at that point, but Walla Walla, for some reason, again, I think it was one of those like, well, my sisters attended Walla Walla. I don't really want to go there. And of course, Andrews University was the other one in the running, if you will. And we had been there in the past. In fact, there was a lot of family ties, if you will, at Andrews University. My dad had gone to grad school there. Both of my sisters were actually born in Bering Springs when my parents were there. At the time, I did have an uncle that taught there, and I had a couple of cousins. So it was more or less like, hey, you know what? Let's do this Andrews University thing. It can't be too bad. And so I would love to tell you that my trip from Wenatchee to Andrews was a breeze and a piece of cake. I have known for having some separation anxiety, and in the past for whatever reason, but I do remember going, and I was flying from Seattle to Denver, and then Denver to Chicago. And of course, my family went and took me to the airport in Seattle. I remember getting in the plane. I remember exactly what I was wearing, but anyway, that's kind of beside the point. And as the plane's taking off, I'm looking out the window, and we are in full flight, and I'm still looking out the window, and I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. Why am I even doing this? I'm leaving everything that I know. I'm leaving my family. I'm leaving my friends, and I'm going to a place that might as well have never been, because, I was very, very young when we lived there for a couple of months. We landed in Denver, and by the time we landed in Denver, and I say me because my family didn't come with me, I had made up my mind that I was going to talk to the airline lady, and I was going to tell her that I needed to go back to Seattle. And so sure enough, I got off the plane, went up to the airline counter and talked to the lady. I said, look, something happened. I didn't lie, but I did tell something happened. I need to go back to Seattle. And the airline lady did a whole on her computer. And I don't know why she believed me and she let me, but sure enough, she said, okay, well, that's fine. I switched your ticket, and I put you in the next flight back to Seattle. Downside is that you're gonna have to spend all day here because it doesn't leave until the evening. I was like, that's not a big deal. That's great. So of course I told my parents. I called them. I told my parents, and my parents were like, "You're gonna what?" And and so at that point everything was set, and I said, can someone please come and pick me up in Seattle again? And I'm surprised they didn't tell me that I was on my own, but obviously they were nice enough to my dad went back to Seattle to pick me up. And I went back, and it was late already when I flew back into Seattle. My dad picked me up, and I've lived in enough places that there's hard and harsh winters. But I do remember when he picked me up, it was snowing, and it snowed. It's probably one of the worst snowstorms I've ever been through. Um, that it snowed from the time we left until the time we got home, over 2 mountain passes. Obviously, it took us more than 2.5 hours to get back. But um, I got back, and then the next morning we all woke up, and it was kind of an odd situation because here I wasn't supposed to be there. My parents were just kind of like, so what's the plan? I mean, that like, you had a plan, now you changed it. And I knew that what I had done was probably not the best situation um, to put myself into. And they were very clear with me. They said, you you chose to go to Andrews, um, and I think they took it as a life lesson. You need to stick with your plans, and we've prayed about it, and so you just gotta you just gotta own up to it. And we don't know what you need to do, but you need to go back. And actually, I ended up going to Andrews to start in the back then it was winter quarter, but I ended up going to Andrews in January. And the first time around when I went, or when I was on my way over, it was about a week before classes started. And so I do remember kind of thinking like, wow, this is crazy. What am I going to do? Knowing what the right thing to do was at that moment. I do remember that was probably about one of the first times that I actually got down on my knees and prayed. And I said to God, I said, look, you're going to have to make this incredibly clear. I wasn't necessarily looking for a sign. I wasn't specific on a sign, but I said, I mean, like, if you pretty much could, if you want to slap me, by all means, like, you need to make it clear. And so during that day, I was looking at plane tickets. I don't think my parents knew that I was really looking into that, but I had to do something. That afternoon, I went out to get the mail, and as I was coming back into the house with letters, and there was a letter to me. And so I opened it and realized that the local hospital system, which of course I had been in the ER plenty of times, broken ankles, from basketball, all that stuff. There was actually a check to me for $502. Now, the funny thing is that during those couple hours I was looking for tickets, the best ticket price that I had found was $500 and some change. This check was actually $502. So to me, that was like, hey, you know what? Like, again, I didn't pray for a specific sign, but this was the sign that God was essentially telling me, you need to go back. A few days later, of course, I ended up getting into another airplane. And I would love to tell you that I got in that plane. Ironically, or maybe I guess it makes sense, it was the same thing: Seattle, Denver, Chicago. My uncle was actually going to go pick me up in Chicago. And I wish I could tell you that I got in that plane and I put my arms back, and it was great, because it was not. It was rough, especially, going through Denver again. Somehow, obviously, God gave me the the strength to get in the next plane to Chicago. And I was actually flying into Midway. And some of you guys, I might have flown through Midway. Midway is actually, that particular airport is actually in the middle of Chicago, in a city. Not necessarily the nice part of downtown of Chicago, but it's in the city. And back then, when I arrived in Chicago Midway, I noticed rather quickly that the scenery was a lot different than Washington State. It's winter time, and back then, Midway it still looked like a bus station, like a dirty bus station. And I do remember going through there, and my uncle my uncle picked me up, like I said, and I remember driving out of the city with my uncle and just kind of pretty much taking it all in and thinking like, this is a lot different. And then, as you know, when you head from Chicago to Bering Springs, you have to go through Gary, Indiana. In Gary, Indiana, it's not, I don't think anybody knows a whole lot about Gary, Indiana, other than I do believe Michael Jackson was born there. But if you've gone through there, Gary, Indiana, it is a sad looking place. And then you add to the fact with a Midwest winter day, which obviously is gray and it's incredibly cold. I did think to myself, what did I get myself into? This is crazy. Of course, at that point, I was already there. And I can also say that, those coming weeks after I arrived, they were pretty rough section of my life, if you will. Obviously, I started school and I at Andrews University, the academic difficulties kept going to a point that after a couple of years, I ended up in the dean's office hearing the words, "We're not really sure why you're here. You're academically dismissed." And that was kind of one of those moments that I just kind of stopped and just really kind of thought to myself, this is crazy. Well, like why come all the way out here for this? And of course, as a younger male, I was thinking like this, I never got into trouble. I always went to class. In fact, I was one of the first ones there. I never sat up front, by the way, but I was always in class. And I do remember at that point, I said, you know what, this is not going to be the last words that I hear from this institution. The policy, of course, I'm sure none of you guys know what the policies are for people that are academically dismissed. You are able to go to a different institution, get your grades up, and if you choose to come back, you can. And so I ended up going the next semester to Lake Michigan Community College, just down the road in Benton Harbor. I am pleased to inform that after that semester, I got all A's and B's. Don't ask me what classes I ended up taking because I really don't remember. But they were not all physical education classes. And so, the following semester I did go back to Andrews, and at that point for me it was just more of a you said what? No, like I'm back and here's my transcript. You have to let me back in. And again, at that point I still had in my mind that I was at Andrews to go to school, and eventually, again, with Andrews and academically speaking, it was kind of off and on. I was more in the 11-year bachelor's program. And so eventually, as you guys know, obviously, I ended up meeting Katie. I have no doubt, and later on in life, I did, kind of looking back, I did realize that I was at Andrews and God wanted me to go to Andrews to meet Katie. I would like to think that she feels the same way, but anyway. So we met at Andrews, of course, and again, I'm just kind of fast forwarding here. We ended up getting married in 2006. And then in 2008, we ended up, at the time, I had taken some time off of school to work to get her through, which of course, as you can imagine, I did not mind at all. And in 2008, we decided to actually move here to Maryland. We ended up eventually, soon after we got here, renting a little apartment right across the furniture store here in town. And Katie was actually finishing up grad school. She was doing some clinicals, I think both in Hagerstown and in Frederick. And that was in 2008. And then in around 2006, or sorry, 10, I went back actually to Shepherd University, and I finally finished glad to tell you that I did finish my bachelor's degree at Shepherd University. And also it was around the time that we decided we were going to start a family. So in 2010, we all got very excited. And this is, I think, where some of you guys start coming in, and that's where, we also started coming to Middletown Church. So some of you guys know some of these stories. But, in 2010, Oliver was born, and we were very excited. First grandchild on both sides of the family. I was very excited, obviously being that boy, and I had never really seen, I had never seen anyone with my own DNA. So I was very, very excited. He was born Frederick Memorial, and eventually, Katie got discharged from the hospital with Oliver, and we went home. We had purchased our first home in Keysville, and I do remember that the afternoon, evening, when we brought Oliver home, that Jerry and Maureen also came over. Again, it was just kind of, we're just kind of basking in the whole idea of our first child, and we finally brought him home. It felt very surreal, I guess. And eventually Jerry and Maureen left, and I remember coming back into the house, closing the door, and then I see Katie standing in the living room holding Oliver, and I looked at her, and we both looked at each other, and we had this feeling of and we're looking at Oliver, and what did we just get ourselves into? And again, some of you guys remember us then. And then after some time, once we felt like we knew what we were doing with a baby, we started, of course, I think it was a natural progression, started to think about adding to our family. And we decided, and we knew that we wanted to adopt. And we looked into international adoptions, and at the time we were a little too young. And so we did start praying. We did start praying for God to lead us, and we did feel a strong calling from God to really truly do this. And we did start praying, and we decided that we're just going to go ahead and get licensed through the Department of Social Services in Washington County to adopt, hopefully through the foster care system. And Katie did want me to emphasize that we did pray about this situation for exactly 9 months. There's, as you can imagine, there's a whole process that goes into going and getting licensed. They're not just going to give a license to some random people. And I also remember the first class that we went for this, in order to get this process started. And after the first class, the social worker came around to just kind of meet the families, and I saw a social worker coming towards us, and she finally came. She introduced herself, and essentially she just sat us down and said, "Look, this is all cute and this is all nice, but this is not the best way to start a family. It's hard, it's complicated, and we're just kind of sitting there like, essentially just letting her finish talking. And we finally just told her that, well, we're not starting a family. Ah, of course, that was very exciting for her. The classes themselves were 10 weeks. Um, and we finally got licensed in July, I believe. And really, just from the time you get licensed, at that point, the Department of Social Services can call you at any point, any time, and say, "Hey, there's a child," and you just kind of go with it. And that summer, we were actually planning on going on a trip to visit my family. At that point, my family had moved to Michigan. And so we were going to go. I want to say too that it was probably the first long trip that Oliver was going to take. At the same time, I had been experiencing some pain on my side, and it would just kind of come and go, and it was just annoying. And that we were supposed to leave on a Thursday. We were going to do a long weekend in Michigan, and I had to be at work for a meeting. And by the way, and I still work there, but I've always, and this is kind of a parenthesis, I've always heard about how God has an amazing sense of humor, and you always hear about it, and it's like, oh, okay, that's fine. And but it kind of takes a different meaning when it actually you experience something. The whole idea and the whole thought of me and school and whatnot, I thought it was actually somewhat funny and ironic that I am an academic advisor at a higher ed institution. But so like I said, I had to be at a meeting at work, and we were going to leave right after the meeting, and the pain just kind of got worse or maybe more, and to a point that Katie said, you know what, why don't we do this? And I think that perhaps I'm not the most, what's the term? When I get sick or something hurts, I don't want to say I'm kind of a baby, but okay, so she said baby. And I think at that point she was like, you know what? Why don't we do this? We're leaving, go to your meeting. After the meeting, as we know, Meredith is right next to Hagerstown Community College. Just go in, go to the emergency room. They can check you out, and we'll be on our way. And so that's what I did. I got there. I remember going through the sliding doors into the emergency room, and I do remember on the sliding door, on the left sliding door, a big sticker that said Washington County Safe Haven Place. And I went in, and they started checking me out, and like, oh, it's appendicitis. Oh, it's appendicitis this, appendicitis that. And like, obviously we have to do surgery. And I'm thinking like, no, you don't get it. Like, we're going on a trip. Like, can we just do this maybe after the trip or something? Like, oh, you can't. And so, I started getting a little upset and just kind of mad about the whole situation, because I really wanted to go to Michigan, show off my family, my wife, my, Oliver, whatever. And right before, and at that point, Katie had already, made it to the emergency room. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but before, obviously, they took me in to do, whatever you have to do for appendicitis. Someone decided, I don't know if it was a doctor or nurse, someone, they go, let's check something else. And so they checked it, and it's like, oh, it's not appendicitis. I'm like, oh, that's great. It's actually diverticulitis, but it's really infected. So you have to spend the night. And again, it was kind of like one of those, like, no, you don't get it. We're on our way. And anyway, the doctor said, look, you don't have a choice. You can't just let this go. So Katie looked at me. A lot of times she's the voice of thinking clearly, I guess, if he was like, it's just fine. Just, they're going to put you on antibiotics. And, we probably still have time to leave tomorrow. No big deal. So I spent the night there at the hospital. And the next morning, I'm ready. I didn't hook myself from everything, but I wanted to. And later that morning, Katie and Oliver came and to see me. And it's already almost mid-morning and the doctor hasn't come around. And I was in a fairly bad mood, to say the least. To a point that Katie said, we're just gonna, you got your car here, you got a cell phone, we're gonna go home, because it's not incredibly pleasant to be around you right now. And so they went home, and I think that just kind of made me even a little more upset. But I wanted the attention to myself, and they went home, and I'd stay there in the room, and then it was lunchtime, early afternoon, and I'm thinking, yeah, there's no way we're gonna be able to go on this trip. And and then Katie calls me, and to tell me that she had just gotten a call from the social worker, and that they had a baby that they're wanting to be placed with us. And I was already kind of upset, and I'm like, well, this is great. Like, I'm stuck here. I can't leave. And I said, she's gonna have to be you and Oliver. And she's like, no, you don't understand. The baby they want to place with us, actually, the birth mom came in last night to Meredith, gave birth, and the baby's actually one floor below you. And I was like, huh, that's very interesting. And moving forward right then, she said that the social worker that was trying to work things out, that we could all go downstairs and really meet Anna for the first time. And so of course I didn't have anything contagious, so obviously they let me. And of course, that's how we ended up, what we thought and what we still think today, that was definitely God's plan to add to our family. And we brought Anna home, and a couple of, I want to say maybe not even 2 years later, after we brought Anna home, we Katie came to me and said, hey, why don't we adopt special needs kids from China? And I was like, nah, we have a boy, we have a girl. Part of our fence had a white picket fence. You get the idea. We're good. And she didn't say anything else from that point on. And about exactly a year later, I came to her and I said, hey, let's adopt a child with special needs from China. And I didn't know that at the time, but she obviously told me, like I said, from the first time she brought it up a year before, she didn't say a word. And then later on, she'd tell me, from when you said that we were done, or that you thought that we were done having kids, I prayed for a whole year. And then all of a sudden, just one day out of nowhere, I came to her and I said, hey, let's do that. The whole process to adopt Maddie, obviously from China, from the time we started to the time we actually traveled to China, was exactly 9 months. And it was hard. Again, I don't have the time to go into details, but at that point we were in a situation that we could adopt from internationally. One of the interesting things, and we knew, Katie did a lot of reading about this subject, was a couple of things, but one of the ones that stood out to me was the fact that you're I hate to say it, but you're literally picking out a kid out of a catalog. I mean, I'll be honest. And one of the things that stuck to me was the fact that we knew, and from what we have read, what mostly Katie read, as she would tell me, she's the reader, is that a lot of times when families actually go to China, when they actually get the child, it's not the one that they had picked. It's a completely different child. I do remember praying about that situation, but also, again, because we felt strongly that God called us to adopt Maddie. I do remember, and we even verbalized this to each other, we are going to go to China and we are going to take whatever child they give us. Even if it's not the one that we picked out. months leading up and weeks leading up to our trip to China, there was a couple of things. We had some people that we knew, and even unfortunately some family. They're like, look, you don't want to adopt a child with special needs. You don't know what you're getting yourself into, like, or what you're gonna get for that matter. Like if you know what you're gonna get when you get my point. And then the other thing was too, it's very common for families when they travel to China to just travel, just the parents travel and they leave everybody behind if they have other kids. And for us, that was never an option. You know, we're a family and we're gonna go ahead and and travel together to pick up this child that we were adding to our family. And we made it to Beijing. We actually ended up meeting up with another American family out of Chicago. They were adopting two girls with special needs also. And a couple days later, we traveled to the province where Maddie was at. And of course, we literally went to the orphanage there. And it finally came time, and you could tell that, okay, we're ready to bring these kids out. The other family was there too, and they finally bring the two girls out for the other family. And they were throwing a fit, they were screaming, they were crying, they were just, yeah, which I can understand. And then they finally brought Maddie out, and Maddie comes over, or they bring her over, and they give her to Katie, and Maddie's just kind of looking at Katie, and then we got the other two roaming around, and within minutes, our kids started playing with Maddie and talk about making a connection right off the bat. Again, we finally brought Maddie home, and it would be great. It would be great and amazing. Again, some of you guys know some of these details that have happened to us. And after about a year, after we brought Maddie home, what I really thought about it was, it would be great to say that, we lived happily ever after, and boom, we're here. But as you guys know, about a year after, our family, went through a pretty rough time, and thankfully we have a lot of, really good support. We have a good support system here at church, and her job, my job, and so we obviously made it through. Again, it wasn't easy, but we've been very blessed again to have a very good support system. And that's one of the things that kind of brings me back to the beginning, where I started this morning, that there's so many things that we go through in life. Something that I have learned as I've gotten older, is that I've been able to notice and almost touch it, if you will, that as we get closer to God as individuals, it's a little bit easier to hear God's voice and really to understand what His will is for us. It's hard. I mean, sometimes I think we've all experienced those situations. I'm gonna stay in bed just a little longer because I'm so tired. And I also think, and I think God really truly does call us to really just make the time and and the effort to every single day to come to Him and get to know Him and build our relationship with God. I'm pretty much jumping a few years from 2011, where I started, to the 2018 Boston Marathon, and and some of you guys may be thinking like, oh, here we go again. But kind of in a nutshell, same Desiree. At that point, she was married, so it was Desiree Linden. 7 years after she debuted at the Boston Marathon, pretty much everybody had just counted her out. Like, look, you've won some B class marathons. That's nice and all. And like, what are you even doing here? But I thought that that the illustration was pretty amazing because she shows up at Boston Marathon again. um, and same thing, the race starts, you see the same thing that you see every single race. However, this time around, the weather in Boston was terrible. Boston Marathon is in April, and it was about 41 degrees. Katie and I had the very rare opportunity to actually watch the race live together. And again, one of the things that we were just kind of concerned about, and everybody was concerned, was the weather. I mean, it was literally raining sideways. So it was just terrible weather. I mean, the worst weather a runner could imagine. And this was the Boston Marathon. As the runners started running, it was pretty evident that the weather was going to be a big factor in the race. And halfway through the race, the cameras go back to another American runner that had just won the New York City Marathon a few months earlier. She was more or less one of the favorites for this race. The cameras went back to Shalane Flanagan, and the commentators are thinking, what's happening? So Shalane had actually stopped to go to the bathroom, some porta potties there along the race. And at the same time, we all noticed that Desiree also started dropping back from the lead pack. And then it was very evident what Desiree was actually going to do. She didn't stop running, but it was very evident that Desiree had slowed down to essentially help Desiree come up to the lead pack again. And it's not like cycling that she's going to be drafting off of her. It's just more of a psychological boost to have someone there that can bring you back. And so sure enough, by the time they both got back up to the to the lead pack, all of a sudden they get to mile 21, the top of Heartbreak Hill again, and all of a sudden there's Desiree just pretty much running in first place. And then everybody was just kind of strung out, along the way behind her. Those miles kind of flew by, 21 through 26. She makes a left turn into Boylston Street, into the finish line, and there's no one to be seen near Desiree. And so she finally, obviously she won the Boston Marathon. I think it had been about 32 years since an American runner had won the marathon. We're all super excited, very very inspiring to see, of course, and it was very inspiring to see live. And then after the race, just like any other sports, there comes the press conferences, and and the press conference with her specifically, it was very interesting because they did ask her, what went through your mind? I mean, you're in the lead pack, and then you see one of your competitors drop back, and then you waited for her, you came back up, and then you eventually won the race. And she said, I don't, and I do remember watching the press conference, and she literally said, look, I don't know, but at mile 3 or 4, and these are athletes that know their bodies incredibly well, but at mile 3 and 4, I knew that this was not going to be my day. And so at that point I said, and I did talk to some other fellow runners, American runners, that, hey, if there's anything I can do for you during the race, just let me know. I'm probably gonna just drop out of the race. And she says it was something about really just stop thinking about myself and really start thinking about others. And when Shalane Flanagan, dropped back to go to the bathroom, and I waited for her, she said, what I've got to lose? I'm just gonna help her, and hopefully, she'll, go team kind of a thing, and she'll hopefully do well. And so she said, all of a sudden, I just kind of got my second win. And again, I stopped thinking about myself, and all of a sudden I started running well again. And then the one reporter kind of pressed her a little more. It's like, but like, what was the difference? What was the difference between 2011, when you were up and coming and young and full of energy, to now, 7 years later. And she just kind of paused, and she said, I'm not really sure, other than you got to keep showing up every single day. And to me, that was incredibly amazing because um, I do think that God, like I said earlier, wants us, and He's longing for us to search Him. And really, at the end of the day, I think what He's asking is just, you know what? I want you to show up every day to meet me. Now, as you can see, the title of the sermon, it's called "This Is Your Life," and I've been talking about my life and my family's life. But this is kind of a nice segue to really go into something real quick, and I'm pretty much done. But "This Is Your Life" is actually a couple of months ago. I started thinking about some ways to perhaps help in the church here. And I came up with an idea, and it's kind of a crazy idea, but I'm calling this project "This Is Your Life." And I just spent, a little longer than we usually do telling you guys about my life and my family's life. But I think, even though there's not a whole lot of us here right now, and there's people that I've been worshiping with for a long time, I don't know a lot of people incredibly well. So I decided that I'm going to start recording a podcast with church members, and I want to, and it's not going to be very long. It's about 20 minutes to really get to know. And it's not necessarily for me, but I want to know, for example, Ted, what's his story? What makes him get up every single Sabbath and come to church? I know Ted. I say hi to him every single Sabbath. But do I know Ted other than that? Absolutely not. And so I just thought that, we don't have the time to get together with everyone in the church. We have our personal lives. But we probably do have the time to when we're going to work or whatnot, to listen for 20 minutes, a quick little podcast about other people within our church. And I think it'll be a good thing. If you're sitting there today, right now, thinking, "Oh, that's great, that's awesome," I hope he doesn't come to us. I will come to every single one of you guys, and hopefully you guys, will be open to the idea. My original plan was to to have this podcast ready. The first one I have recorded, the first one with our illustrious pastor. I think he has a very unique story also. But I did learn some things about the pastor, and I think hopefully this project will help people get to know each other. It might not be face to face, but at least we can listen to a little about each other. And we are ready to sing our last hymn.